Hello everyone, this is Sanjay Parashar. Welcome back to the channel. Today we will learn about the difference between query parameter and template parameter in SOA 12c. Also how to use them in REST adapter and in Beeple. I will also tell you when to use what are the best practices and recommended guidelines pertaining to these concepts. And we have already covered basics of REST APIs in Oracle SOA, and if you have not seen those videos, I highly recommend that you guys check them out. We have talked about different HTTP verbs, how to handle them, and all the basics of REST APIs in Oracle SOA. I'll also try and put the link of those videos in the description. So in this video, I will not repeat any of those concepts here. Okay, so let's start. Query parameters are added to the URL after the question mark in your REST API URI. As you can see in this example, we have employee underscore ID as a query parameter, and once you pass value to it, it will look something like this. Query underscore ID is equals to whatever the value that you have that you're passing dynamically. And when we talk about template parameters, they are mostly a SOA term. So if you say template parameter to a MuleSoft developer, he or she might not understand, because in Mule it's known as URI parameter. In certain other programming languages and integration tools and platforms, it is also known as path parameters. So template parameter, URI parameter, path parameters, they all mean the same thing, and they are part of your regular REST API's URI. As you can see in the example, we have department, and then there is curly braces which is with department name. So this is to filter out what department that employee belongs to. And here the value of this URI parameter or template parameter or path parameter is HR in this particular example, which you can set dynamically through your coding. Now let's talk a little bit about the best practices and the recommended guidelines around these concepts. The query parameters are used to sort or filter the resources, and on the other hand, path parameters are used to identify a specific resource or resources, as you saw in the example that I just showed you. To filter out the department is it's best to use template parameter for that, and if you would want to filter out employee ID who belongs to HR department, it's best to use query parameter. But again, these are just guidelines. I do not recommend to put an optional parameter as a path parameter. For paging, for sorting, for optional parameters, use query parameters. So these are the few best practices that I think everyone should keep in mind whenever they are developing a REST API and they are using query parameter and template parameter. But I still want to emphasize on the fact that these are guidelines and best practices. They are not rules. So if you don't follow them, it's not that you will not be able to compile your code. Your code is going to work just fine. Even you will be able to achieve what you want to achieve through your code. But I personally recommend to always use best practices. Now let's do the demo. Okay, so in my JDeveloper, as you can see, I have this application, SOA REST demo app. Now let's create a SOA project to demonstrate how we can use query parameter and template parameter in SOA. So I'm just giving it a name as REST QP for query parameter, TP for template parameter demo, and let's configure our REST adapter. And in this, I want to create two resource paths. That means this REST service will have two different operations, and in one operation we will be using query parameter to send a certain output, and in the other operation we will be using template parameter or path parameter to send an output. So let's do that. So first let's configure the resource path for our query parameter. Then let's create a method. QP method, we will use HTTP verb as get, and now we'll create a query here. Let's give query as name. So now for query parameter, we'll have a parameter named name. If you want to see how it will look like in the actual environment, you can click on this and it will give you more like a sample URL. So we'll have name and whatever value that you will pass, and how to pass it we will check that in this demo itself. So now we have one operation created. Now let's create another operation which will be for template param demo, and in this here itself we will give whatever the template parameter that we want to create. So let me give it as location. I'll click on OK, and let's click on this plus icon, and you will see we already have this location here, and the style, if you see, is template. So method here we'll keep it as get. I'll click on OK, and if you'll see now the difference between these two is if you see QP method, we have style as query, and if we see TP method, we have the style as template. So let's complete this. So now our REST adapter is configured. It has two operations, QP method and TP method. QP will use query parameter and TP method will use the template parameters. And it's now configure our beeple also. Now in our beeple, as we have already created multiple videos on multiple operations, even in OSB we use operational branching, in SOA we use pick activity. We have already created multiple videos on that, so I'll not explain how that works. We'll just simply use pick activity to handle multiple operations. So initially let's use query parameter operation here first. We'll use this partner link here and query parameter method, right? So now in the variable you can create one JSON variable here. So whatever value that user will pass to this particular service will come to this particular variable. This is what we are trying to say with this. Now we would also want to reply something to the user. We'll say reply output, and here also we need to ensure that we are checking or selecting the exact method that we selected for the onMessage branch. And here let's create another variable called JSON output variable. Alright, now let's create another onMessage branch for our template parameter. Select the same partner link, but the method will be TP method. We can use the same variable because both method supports JSON. And even this reply output also, either you can drag and drop it or you can copy and paste it, because we can use the same output variable. One more thing that we must ensure that we click on this check instance so that your compiler would know from where to begin, like main method in your Java. Now There are multiple ways that you can handle the value of query parameter and template parameter in your Beeple. There are many ways. You can get the whole thing as a JSON, you can convert that into XML, or you can play around with JSON and send the response back. That is one way. I personally recommend and use the way that I'm going to demonstrate you guys now. So for that, I'll create two string variable. One is QP variable, that is query parameter variable, where I would want to store the value, whatever value that user will send, I want to store that into this particular string variable. So let me just do that. Now the other variable I will create as template parameter variable. And now what I'll do is, rather than doing the lengthy thing where I store JSON into a variable, then create a translate activity, convert that JSON into XML, create a schema out of it, or create a native schema, an XSD out of the JSON to convert it, and then send it back after manipulating the data. What I can do is I can use the rest.binding.query parameter, or rest.query whatever the query parameter name that you gave. We can leverage that option from the property section. So if you see here, rest.query.name, so this was the value that we gave name as a query parameter. Now what we are telling the code is, whatever the name that is part of our query parameter, put that name into this query parameter variable. Now whatever the response or whatever the body is coming, or request payload is coming, I don't really care about it. All I want is that the query parameter value will be stored in this QP variable. Similarly, we can fetch the same thing in this for template parameter also. Rest.template.location. So location was the name that we gave for our template parameter, and whatever value that user passes, I want that to be part of this template variable. Click on OK, apply, and now we are ready to use these values and send those back to the user. For that, we'll use assign activity. It's very straightforward, extremely simple, but with the same approach you can take care of as many query parameters or template parameters as you want. These properties come in handy even to manipulate or pass the dynamic complete URI also. Alright, so let's assign query parameter in the output variable. So what we can do is, it's a name in query parameter, we are passing as a name. So for that, let's concat this query parameter So the output will be the query parameter value is whatever the name that we gave. Let me click on OK, apply, and now something similar we will be doing for this also. It just here we will say that the template param value is, and then whatever the location that we give. And I think our code is complete. Let's just review. We create instances checked. We have query parameter method here, and here we have taken query name to the QP variable, and then we are assigning that QP variable to our output variable, which is of a JSON type. Similarly, here we have the template variable under the template location, and we are assigning the same template variable to the output variable, and then we're replying that back to the user. So to me this looks good. Let's deploy this code and test it. And during testing, I'll show you how your payload looks like. Even in your request or the input variable, you will be able to see your query parameters and template parameters. So as I mentioned earlier, there are multiple ways to handle it, but this is how I do, and this is how I recommend my team also. So it is deployed. Now let's open the service and test it. So as you can see, this is our service, REST QPTP demo. A little bit strange name, but that's okay. So once you click on this test, you'll get the two options, which operation you would want to call, which resource of your WADL you would want to call. So let's call query parameter first. Under here, we get an option to give a name. So let me give my name only, Sanjay, and I'll click on this test. If you see, the output is query parameter value is Sanjay. So it read the input that user gave, and it replied whatever we would want it to reply. So now let's check the flow of it so that you know what else we could have done. If I show you here, I have this JSON and I have this name and Sanjay here. So this is my query parameter only, right? So in this, if I would want, I can parse this JSON also, extract this Sanjay, the query parameter value from the payload, and then reply what I replied earlier. But instead of doing that, what we did is we just got this value. So we received the value from the property itself. So it just takes all the guesswork out of the equation. Similarly, let's check for the template parameter. Here we will change the resource to template parameter. We'll go to request, and now if you see, we have location and style is template. So in location, let's just say Delhi. I'll click on this, and template parameter value is Delhi. So something similar has happened. Here if you see, even this template parameter is also coming as part of your JSON payload. However, we got it from the template. Now, there is no rule that says that you cannot use this both in the same resource URL. I just did this so that it will be easier for you guys to follow. However, you can use as many path variables or URI parameters or template parameters within one resource path, and as many query parameters as you want in one resource path. So whatever the requirement or your business requirement is, you can fulfill using this particular approach. So that's all for today. Thank you so much for your time. Take good care of yourselves and have a nice rest of the day. Take care. Bye-bye.